And welcome into the Slate Tuesday edition, October 19th, 2021. This is a DraftKings program. We take you up until 6 o'clock. We start in the 5 o'clock-ish hour. And tonight, the NBA is back. We have a pair of games on the slate. We have the top four teams in terms of favorites to win the championship all playing tonight. Of course, we have the Nets taking on the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks. And then later tonight, the Lakers hosting the Warriors. Should be good. We have two DraftKings content specialists, and I asked both of them if that was the appropriate title before we began this show. Chirag Hira is here. Matt Meiselman is here. These two gentlemen were with us during a pandemic season last year and delivered for folks during the season. So we hope you stay with us here with DraftKings, Twitter, Twitch, also on YouTube to get all of their feedback. Chirag, hi, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Brendan. Happy to be here for another exciting season. I'm really looking forward to this year. I think we get a full 82 games and should have a normal schedule again, but we'll see how much COVID already impacts us.
Chirag is coming to us from the DraftKings podcast studio in our Boston headquarters. Matt Meiselman, you're back. You want to take your Tyler Bass victory lap now, or you want to save that?
Yeah, I'll just quickly do it now. I got the ownership very, very accurately correct yesterday for the football game. The results weren't exactly what I hoped, but everyone played the kicker, and the kicker had 3 field goals, and not me. So that was fun.
Yeah, good for you. Meiselman did ask to take a victory lap early on in the show, and we did that for him today. So the plan is for every Tuesday to dive into some NBA angles on the sports book and DFS side. Tonight, of course, a 2-game slate makes the DFS construction and strategy a little bit different. Chirag, you said it. You're excited for the season. We'll go to each of you here on this. Just general approach to the year as far as what you expect from the NBA. And you can take this however you'd like. Just how you go about your daily fantasy construction, suggestions to the people, and also anything sportsbook-wise that you want to share.
Well, I really enjoy playing towards the beginning of the season because, nobody really knows what's going to happen. I mean, you can definitely predict stuff and try to project it out. NBA is definitely more projection friendly due to the stat counting that happened. You can grab a rebound, get a fantasy point, you can get a steal, a block. And whereas in football, you have to catch the ball. And there are players that sometimes get shut out from catching the ball, and it's more difficult to do that in NBA. So I think the floors are higher, and I really like the a little bit softer pricing early on in the season. So I try to attack a lot early on and then go from there and pace it out because, after we get into a crazy part of the year, it just gets to a point where you have to use your muscle memory. Like if somebody was ruled out for this game and the sub came in for him, does that make him a play again? What did his salary move to? So there are different ways to approach it. And I think that's the part I really like about playing early on in the season is to gain all those data points so that when I have to make quick decisions, when lineups are locking and lineups are changing, then I'm ready to go with that.
Matt, you even said it yesterday. We kind of caught off guard that the season is already here. So how do you digest all of this information, and what are some things that big picture you try to keep in mind when you're betting or getting a lineup in for NBA?
Well, as far as diving into the season, I think it's nice that there's only a 2-game slate tonight as kind of like the warm up for when all the chaos ensues. We already have a ton of news potentially to worry about for tomorrow. Chirag and I spent most of last year doing Wednesday night shows with a lot more games and all those staggered time slots where you're trying to figure out when is news going to break and is it before or after lock? And then how do you set up your lineup so you can make all the different swaps? Like, to me, every single night in the NBA is just so much different. And it's almost like you're playing a different DFS sport every day. Like there are some days where, a couple starters on a team are out and there's a few players that are starting now that are between 3 and 4K. And it's like, all right, now the lineup, I have to figure out how to be contrarian elsewhere because I have to play those guys because the value is just too good. And then there are other nights where no one's injured and it's a totally different dynamic where you actually have to try to, you can potentially be contrarian in any lineup spot. There's no one that's a must play. Tonight's slate seems like it's a little bit of a mix. Like we got some news earlier. I don't know if maybe you guys knew that this was supposed to happen, that Jordan Poole is starting for the Warriors. I thought he was probably going to come off the bench. Maybe I was just totally off base there, but he's the guy tonight. Like if there's a must play on this slate, he's at least the number one choice. Like I don't know if he is a must play or not, but this is the guy that everyone's going to. So I don't know if this is a totally unique situation, but normally on 2-game slates, like there's usually not a guy that's so obviously underpriced. But with Klay Thompson not back yet, and then we got this news that Andrew Wiggins might be on a minutes restriction along with Draymond Green. So that could mean more for Jordan Poole. So like this is the focal point, at least for me tonight.
You can certainly dive in the 2-game slate tonight. There is a $1.25 million tip-off special on DraftKings, $250,000 to first place. And look, like you said, Meiselman, you can kind of sink your teeth into the NBA season, not thinking as much because there's not as many games to consider. And on that note about Klay Thompson, he's about a month away from being cleared for full contact. We can certainly start daily fantasy and sort of similar to what we talk about in the NFL. When you play in a showdown in the NFL, there's so many high-priced guys. You're going to ultimately fade someone that kind of bugs you. You're not going to love fading a star, and so many stars with the 4 teams, again, that are favored to win the championship in this slate tonight with the Nets number 1, the Lakers 2, Bucks 3, Warriors 4. Chirag, how do you attack this 2-game slate tonight with so many studs?
Well, the way I look at it is I believe that the Lakers of all teams are going to be the most contrarian options. You're going to have more tournament picks there because you don't know, is Russell Westbrook going to go off? Is LeBron? Is it going to be AD? What's the matchup here? Who it is? And due to this lack of size with the Warriors, it could be AD. But I think that's where this roster construction is going to come down to, because you know what KD and Harden are going to do. You know what Giannis is going to do, and Curry. I think these are all superstar players that have 50-point floors here in this contest, but you don't know what the Lakers trio is going to do. So I believe that either AD or Westbrook are going to be the one that kind of differentiates our lineups. I'm not really feeling LeBron. I think he's going to come out and have that facilitator role. And sure, he can be in the facilitator role, and he led the league in assists 2 years ago with that role. But now with Westbrook there, I think he wants to get his boys involved and work his way into the game.
Okay, makes some sense. Russell Westbrook tonight, his points, rebounds, assist prop on the DK Sportsbook is at 37.5. LeBron won better at 38.5. Meiselman, you into this angle by Chirag with the Lakers value. I guess this kind of not segues because we can bounce back and forth, Sportsbook DFS, but it kind of leads to your point that maybe the Warriors, with that having the 4th best odds right now to win the championship, they're a little overvalued right now, potentially.
Yeah, so a couple points. I think Chirag is right that the Lakers will be the contrarian team out of these 4 teams. But just before we jump into sportsbook, and I do think maybe both of these teams in this game are overrated to a decent extent. But we'll certainly get into that. But as far as just like macro level DFS, I think on slates like this where there's only 2 games or any sort of small slate, what you do, I think, is very, very largely dependent on the contest you're in. So if you're playing in one of these like thousands of entry tournaments, there's basically nothing you can do to have a unique lineup unless you're doing something that's like very off the board strategy wise. So like even if you fade, let's say Giannis and Durant and Harden, because like those are the most owned guys from the high end range, and you play like Curry and Davis and then like Middleton or Holiday or something like that. And then maybe you still don't even play Jordan Poole because he's the chalk guy that's cheaper, and you play like Kent Bazemore or some other guys like that. Like that lineup, you still could tie with 80 people for first, because like it's just a normal enough lineup if it uses all the salary. So like if you're playing in something resembling a Millie Maker on a 2-game slate, I think like you leave salary over, or you do something really weird, like play Giannis and Middleton and Holiday and don't play any Nets studs. And then maybe like, or maybe the winning lineup in that scenario has like LeBron and Westbrook and Rondo, like, right? Like something crazy like that, because anything that's more normal in a contest of that size, there just aren't enough combinations. But in a smaller field contest, yeah, I think just like not playing Harden and playing Durant and not playing Giannis and instead playing Holiday and then playing Curry or Davis or something like that. Like for smaller field stuff, I do think that those strategies make a ton of sense. So that's kind of where I'm looking. Like if you're in a more moderate size DFS contest, maybe just look to pivot at the high end and maybe like don't play. I don't know where I stand on Jordan Poole on it. Like I think that's really a tough call. So ultimately it's like you don't want a lineup that's too chalky overall, where like if you're starting with Giannis and Harden, don't put Jordan Poole in that lineup necessarily, but like the lineup you just put there with Curry and Davis, like that lineup could have Jordan Poole in it, right? Like you get what I'm saying, where it's just you don't want the full lineup to be too popular. But then again, like Poole's going to play so many minutes, so I really do think he's a difficult fade tonight.
So based on what I'm hearing from the both of you, is the Lakers being a contrarian play as far as if you had to pick one of the four teams, which game is better to stack? And I bring up the sports book to say this: the Bucks and the Nets have the larger total tonight by 7 points, 233.5. I think it's up to 234 on the DK Sportsbook for tonight. And then you have 226.5 for the later game. How do you look at that as to how you might want to stack this matchup or the two games?
I honestly,
Chirag, you go ahead.
I honestly think that it doesn't really matter per se I'm not looking at it from a stacking perspective. I'm thinking about more of like, okay, hey, these are my pieces. Okay, I had these expensive pieces, and this is the kind of exposure that I want. I'm not considering any of these games to be one of those things. Maybe even under on the Bucks and Nets, because the Bucks could have this kind of slow coming out party of like, hey, we got our rings and banner and all that, and then the Lakers coming out like, hey, we shook off a little bit of the rust here, and Curry comes out on fire, and you can easily go over. So I think that there's a scenario where there's so many things to consider because of being the first game, so you don't have any data points really. Sure, you can use a preseason, but are the players going 100% in the preseason? So I think it's more important to worry about roster construction than it is specifically stacking.
The classic ring ceremony situation that actually came up a couple weeks ago at the Tampa Bay Lightning. They laid a complete egg on opening night when they hosted and got their they raised the banner and got their championship rings. They stunk against the Pittsburgh Penguins, crossing sports to the NHL.
Yeah, basically what ends up happening with these situations is they have all this set up. You get out of your normal routine. Even though it's the beginning of the season, these guys have a normal routine in which they prepare for games. And you kind of break that routine with the ring ceremony. And then you have the crowd that's really extremely hyped and they're feeding off that. But the other team is more motivated to kind of take that moment from you because it's like, oh, you won our championship. Like, what if Kyrie didn't turn his ankle? This would be our ring, like.
Right. Durant's foot was on the line, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I think that's the reason why I'm also leaning towards the Lakers and Warriors is kind of an up-tempo game. Both these teams, I wouldn't say are going to be strong defensively this year. Whereas the Bucks and Nets, the Nets were historically bad defensively last year, but I think Kyrie not being on the court may help with that now.
Which is astounding when I look back at the over-under numbers for the Lakers and the Warriors, both at the bottom of the league, both bottom three teams to the over in the regular season last year. Meiselman, the counterpoint I would make to Chirag is DiVincenzo, Portis, Hood, all out. So the Bucks, even if they get off to a slow start, they're not as deep tonight. So Giannis, maybe is there value with Middleton and Holiday, both in that 7K range?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely no question that the pricing value is with the Milwaukee-Brooklyn game because we also have Kyrie Irving out. So Harden's underpriced. I think Durant's a little underpriced. Bruce Brown is underpriced. I think those are going to be three popular players. And then on the Bucks, yeah, you listed all those guys that are out. So like Grayson Allen and Jordan Nwora are going to make it into lineups too, as like that's the second unit now, basically. So I think people are going to wind up stacking this Nets Bucks game almost by accident, just because the pricing is just so much more appealing there. Like you could conceivably make a cash lineup that uses 7 players from the first game and then just Jordan Poole from the second game. So for tournaments, like I think just doing the opposite is a viable strategy. I will say though that within that first game, there's 2 guys that I like that I don't think people are going to use, and they're in the middle of the pricing range. Okay. So like if you can pay $7K for Middleton and Holiday, why would you pay roughly $6K for Lopez and Joe Harris? And this is like sort of deja vu to last year in the playoffs, because I feel like I was talking about this a lot for Showdown, for small slates with the Nets and Bucks. Like when they had their series against each other, you saw crazy low ownership on both of those guys because of where they're priced. They're not as cheap as Bruce Brown, and they're they're close enough to Middleton and Holiday that people just play Middleton and Holiday. But like those are going to be the contrarian players from the first game. They're both starters. They're both going to play plenty of minutes. Lopez doesn't have to share center minutes with Bobby Portis, so that should help him a little. But mostly it's about them being contrarian, and Joe Harris can hit 6 threes in any game. He didn't do well in the playoffs last year, and this take really came back to bite me many times. But who knows? New season. Joe Harris is a great shooter. Maybe this is the night he does it. But he'll certainly be contrarian, and so will Lopez. So that's really the main reason I'm looking at him.
I mean, Harris, 46% from three last year. That is just a number you cannot ignore in a regular season format for the Nets, who are, again, visiting the Bucks. That is the first game. And then later tonight, we've got the Golden State Warriors taking on the Lakers. Of course, we all remember that it's a play-in game rematch when LeBron stuck that three in Steph's face. And, of course, the Eastern Conference Finals rematch with the Bucks and the Nets. What other daily, if you had to pick a star to fade, who is the star you're not playing?
I'm not playing LeBron. I'm not really feeling it.
It's not a LeBron night. That's too bad.
Not a LeBron night. I'm not feeling it.
We're running out of those years, We are running out of dates of LeBron nights. So, Meiselman, do you have someone that you're just like, all right, I add it all up, he ain't the guy?
I don't. I think you can make a lineup with any of them. I think there's a couple ways to do this wrong. I think playing Davis, LeBron, and Westbrook all together or something like that is wrong. I mean, unless you're in a contest with 100,000 people, then there isn't really a wrong there. But for a normal size contest, like the chances that all three of those guys have great games, they're very low. And then I think the same is true for Giannis, Middleton, and Holiday. We have seen them all have great games at the same time, but because they're all popular, I just don't think it makes sense to play them all together because a lot of people are actually going to go that route. I don't know that I want to play Durant and Harden in the same lineup either, but like individually, I think any of these guys you can justify as a strong play. I want to prioritize whoever is the most contrarian of this group. And my hunch is that it's Anthony Davis, but okay. I think all three of those Lakers. So yes, the Lakers are worse plays value-wise, all three of those guys compared to the other studs, but the ownership will be lower too. Almost certainly. So I kind of feel like it all just levels out where the guys who are projected probably a little bit worse are a little more contrarian and it kind of just evens them all out. So I really I'm thinking more strategy wise about the cheaper players on this one. I think you can kind of start a lineup with any 2 or 3 of these high priced guys and then just figure it out from there what players make the most sense to go with the studs that you started with. I
don't mean to regurgitate what Chirag said, but he's onto something as far as 2 guys that might not be highly owned in Davis and Westbrook. We also must remind ourselves, do we remember the insane price tags Russell Westbrook was commanding last year? Now, granted, that was in situations where it was a 10-game slate or a 12-game slate. I realize it's 2 games. But you get Russell Westbrook at $8,600. Now, we need to see what it looks like. But to me, just generally speaking for the year, I know this isn't helpful for tonight per se, but I'd like to think LeBron is okay. And Chirag, you probably agree because you're not going to play LeBron tonight. LeBron is okay giving the ball up to Westbrook to run the show.
Yep. That's what I'm feeling. That's what I believe will end up happening. So my understanding right now we have Bazemore starting. So that's the piece of news that we kind of received from Chris Haynes. He expects Kent Bazemore to start. So I believe having that shooting out on the court, we're going to end up seeing is when they go into crunch time, LeBron and AD are going to play in the post and kind of play that bully ball. LeBron can swing over to the 4, AD to the 5. And that's where I think the Lakers are at their strongest. And that sets up for Russell Westbrook to, I would say, easily average 10.5 assists because he's got guys he can just dump it to or alley-oop it to, and then the Lakers setting up with their shooting. So I really just like the way that's why they brought in Westbrook, is because they want somebody that's going to take the load off of LeBron a little bit. And then you have another person that's going to push it. Westbrook is going to push it. He's going to get this pace up. The Lakers were really, really struggling last year in pace. And so now they bring in a guy that can basically run out of the gym by himself. Yeah, he's getting a little bit older, and the Lakers are the oldest team in the league, but they have some shooting now. And I think Westbrook taking that load off LeBron is just going to set it up where LeBron's going to be able to dominate when it's important.
Lakers average age is 30.9 to lead the NBA. off of your note on the news of Bazemore, any consideration for DeAndre Jordan, who is starting?
Maybe. I think he's interesting. Like, you need the game to stay big, so at least
$3,800.
Yeah, he doesn't cost much. And Kevon Looney starting for the Warriors. Like, it depends if you think there's a chance that the Warriors could keep a center in the game, because I think, like, if Draymond's playing center, DeAndre Jordan's not on the floor.
Yep.
But we do have this potential minutes restriction for Draymond, so that could mean that Looney and Wiseman, like, maybe there's more center minutes being played by Warriors guys. So that could mean that DeAndre plays a little more. Like, he's cheap enough that also he could have 20 fantasy points in 15 minutes. And because it's such a small slate, that actually might be good enough. There's one other piece of news. I almost forgot about this. We don't know if Kendrick Nunn is playing.
Yeah,
and
questionable. Yep.
We probably will not have that. I mean, it's 5:30 right now, right? So, like, we might get this momentarily. Like, this could, in the middle of me talking, we might get this news. But assuming we don't know until after lock, if Nunn doesn't play, I think Malik Monk is super interesting, especially as a pivot off of Jordan Poole. Like, if your lineup is maybe a little bit behind going into the late game, you play Monk instead of Poole. Like, Malik Monk is a guy who can score 3 fantasy points in any situation and can score 35 fantasy points in any situation. He's entirely reliant on making threes for his fantasy production. And, like, what does this Lakers second unit look like if Kendrick Nunn doesn't play? So Chirag's nodding. Like, do you think Monk could have that role if especially in games where the Lakers aren't at full strength, right? Like, Monk could be the guy taking most of the second unit shots.
Yep. And you have to keep in mind, Taylor Horton Tucker underwent thumb surgery.
He's out. Yep.
So this kind of backcourt depth is lacking now if Nunn ends up not playing. And Monk was brought in to be their kind of secondary microwave guy. And there were times when he was in Charlotte, and when he got his moment and he played 20 minutes, it was very easy for him to hit value and even exceed value there.
Former lottery pick, and perhaps with a winning team, a team that has aspirations to win in a secondary bench role, perhaps he could thrive. And Wayne Ellington's out too. So there's another guard that's out for the Lakers.
Exactly.
Monk has his own Q tag sitting there next to his name, which is probably going to suppress his ownership a little more. But I think the other variable is just that if people play Grayson Allen early, they play Bruce Brown, they play Jordan Nwora, and then they already have Jordan Poole locked into a guard spot, in that price range, like, there's not going to be swapping to Malik Monk. So I just really, really hope that we don't get this news until after lock and then Nunn gets ruled out late. Because if this comes now, like, people will just know to play Malik Monk. They'll probably take away from some of these Bucks and Nets value guys.
Super interesting that he's 4,500 too.
I'm just looking over here at news. It's still just tomorrow news. Nothing yet on Nunn.
Yeah, but it's just so interesting that he's 4,500, and when you have to make that decision with Poole, like we mentioned, like 4,800, who's going to look at these two rosters and be like, yeah, I'm going to swap off Poole if I'm going into it? And the reason is to consider is if this news does come out and you have that opportunity, and for example, you're chasing, let's say you ended up having somebody that was ice cold in the early games, you might want to switch to Monk regardless. Then if we end up getting that news, if you have Poole in your lineup, because now you need a guy that's going to, not only because if Poole's super popular, then you need the guy that can potentially put the same amount of fantasy points out as him with suppressed ownership.
So one thing to note, though, on the Q is next to his name, but the latest from Kyle Goon, who reports for the Orange County Register, he's now probable tonight.
Yep.
So
he is probable. So that's why Matt mentioned that his ownership could be suppressed, is because of that little Q tag.
We don't have being there. Yeah.
We don't have that official probable. It's only Q or O on DraftKings. So that's the reason why. So when it changes, then we'll get that taken off in a sense.
All right. Makes sense. Once again, Chirag, Hira, Matt Meiselman, both DraftKings content specialists, Brendan Glasheen. We're breaking down the 2-game slate in the NBA. Let's go to the sports book because we haven't done this yet. We'll start with the early game, Nets and Bucks. And looking at some of the lines tonight, the total has creeped up to 234. Nets are getting 1.5. You can get them at plus 100 on the money line. These were two of the best teams last year, fellas, to the over in the NBA, both at high percentages to hit the over. Nets hit the over in 55% of their games. Granted, a 72-game season. They're back to 82 this year. Sixth best for the Nets at the over. The Bucks, 57% of their games hit the over. That was fourth best in the NBA. There's a lead I'm having here. It's the over tonight. What do you guys think? What do you think, Chirag?
I'm taking the under, and I'm taking the Nets on the spread. I really like. I think Bucks are going to come out with the yips, and they'll be celebrating their championship. Their depth is really weak right now, and do they want to go 100 miles an hour in their first game? We're already struggling with depth issues. I don't think so. So for that reason, I'm playing the under and the Nets.
Same game parlay on DraftKings. You can get it at plus 280.
Oh man,
it's pretty good. It's pretty good to take the under, which now is at 233.5 as we speak.
Oh yeah, I already see the people listening to me, and we're moving the lines.
True, dude. It's true.
It's happened instantaneously.
Brooklyn on the money line. Matt, what do you say about the lines for tonight's early game, Nets Bucks?
Yeah, the issue of the Bucks coming out slow, I think, is more just a reason to not bet the Bucks. Like, I think because Kyrie Irving's out, Milwaukee should be favored by more, but I think the uncertainty is high enough here with just how these teams are going to play, how the rotations are going to work. I am a little concerned that Milwaukee is missing so much depth with their bench. And like, I don't know how good Jordan Nwora is. I think he had one of the best single fantasy games in the NBA last season. On the last day of the season, he put up like 64 or something crazy like that at minimum price. But like, he was playing against the Bulls backups. All the Bucks backups were in. I don't think we can use his stats from last year to really gauge how good of a player he is at all. But like, we know what some of these other guys on Milwaukee are. Like, Grayson Allen is fine. I don't like their bench right now. Like, they're going to need DiVincenzo back. Portis definitely helps them. So I'm a little concerned, but like, overall, this just equates to a wash. Like, if the Bucks had their bench with still no Kyrie Irving there, I would like Milwaukee a lot. So I think it all just kind of cancels out in the I mean, this is a typical take for me, but like, it just seems fair. And I think I'm probably going to say the same about the other game too. But I will be interested in props if we get that Kendrick Nunn news. Like, maybe that is reason to hit an over on someone like Kent Bazemore at 8.5 points. Maybe he gets a few extra minutes, a few extra shots up. So I still do think that there's an opportunity potentially there with news, but the spreads and totals, like, I think the market has mostly priced them fairly. And Chirag is more confident that like Milwaukee starts the season slow. I'm more agnostic on that. Like, I have no idea what will happen in these two games.
The Nets last year in the 72 game season, 4 games over 500 against the spread, 38 and 34. So they won 53% of their games ATS last year. As for the Bucks, who faced, remember, that Bucks team was a wagon early in the season. They went 32 and 40 against the spread. Sometimes those numbers were gigantic for the Milwaukee Bucks. And just to remind people, the guys that are out tonight for Milwaukee, DiVincenzo remains out. Portis, Rodney Hood are some key pieces. So Grayson Allen will be a key member of the bench tonight. I'm assuming, will Connaughton start?
I have a feeling I think Grayson's going to start, no? I have a feeling Grayson's going to be in the starting lineup tonight.
Okay. Not too sure.
This shooting guard situation is so interesting on this slate. That's what's taking me out. Grayson, Bruce Brown, Kent Bazemore, Jordan Poole, all projected right now to be the starters. And these are all the value plays that we have to consider on this slate. That's what's like really getting to me. And it's like, who is going to garner the most ownership?
Meiselman, you mentioned some props. What about props in this game and some obvious ones as far as like ones that feel like they're going to hit or they're going to be really close? I listed 3, Giannis, Harden, and Durant. You got the points, rebounds, assist prop for Giannis. It's the largest of the 2 games tonight. It's at 46.5. You take the over, it's at -140. James Harden, same deal, points, rebounds, assists. He's at 40.5. That's -150. And Kevin Durant's point total at 30.5. You can get it for slightly better odds on the over at -105. Anything from this game, Meiselman, as far as a prop that you might consider?
Yeah, I don't really have much. Like, I'm more interested in the other game, and it's mostly just because we've known for longer with this first game what the situation is. Like, we've known for a while Kyrie Irving wasn't going to play. Mm-hmm. The uncertainty level with the second game is so much higher because we have these vague minutes limits potentially for both Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green, and we also have the Kendrick Nunn news. So, like, depending on what sort of announcements come out closer to that game, I think that's where you could strike and find an opportunity. But with the first game, I think it's just pretty much status quo here. Like, Bobby Portis was news, so like maybe you look at Brook Lopez, but I think that's more of a DFS play just because like Lopez is going to be very contrarian because he's priced up, and like props don't interest me much on him. But I do think looking at like Curry overs or Jordan Poole overs potentially, or Bazemore, depending on like, if we find out that Wiggins is only going to play 24 minutes or something, that would be a huge deal for the usage rates for Poole and for Curry. Like the Warriors don't have that many guys to score right now. I think that's part of why Jordan Poole is he's getting so much attention today. So like we'll probably just see more shots for their main guys. And Poole is now one of the main guys with Klay Thompson not there. So yeah, like I don't know.
A lot of points though. So Poole's points prop, sorry to interrupt. It's at minus 135 for the over and plus 110 for the under. 17.5 for Jordan Poole.
You can see why people want to play him at 4,800 in DFS. Like his over under is 18 real points. If he puts up 18 fantasy points, that's almost a good game. So like,
right,
he's in a really good spot, I think.
But you, Chirag, I know you'll be watching closely. In case no one knew, Chirag's a big Lakers fan, and he's come on here. He's very fair. He's telling people to not play LeBron James. So he's not just some like fair weather fan and big LeBron guy telling you play LeBron and take every LeBron prop. Nope, he's fair. But what prop do you like?
I try to be. The props, the thing that really sets up here is when I look at props for early part of the season, it's difficult to make it out because a lot of it is being used as what these players averaged last year in a sense. So the number that jumps out to me is definitely have to be that Kent Bazemore situation at 8.5. You don't really know what you're going to get from him. And he could be setting up here to play 35 minutes even in this game. So I think that's the one that just stands out. Minus 115, 8.5. He doesn't have to do much. He knocks down a couple threes, gets a hoop just in fast break, then you just don't have to do much to get on the over. So I think setting up with the layup to start the year.
Okay, 8.5 points for Kent Bazemore. All it takes is a couple threes, couple spot up corner threes, and gets a little revenge against the team he played for last year. The Lakers, I feel like the Lakers have like every dude that plays the 2 or the 3 that was really good like 3 years ago.
That's fine. That's fine. Do you know that they're passing around the Fountain of Youth? That's what they're drinking in their cups right now. That's what the reports out of LA. The Fountain of Youth is there. So
all right,
that's where they're coming from.
Chirag feels good. Like I mentioned before, these two teams to the over were not very good last year, but Chirag makes a good point. They might not be all that good defensively. That's why I wonder, Anthony Davis to be the top point scorer in this game tonight between the Warriors and the Lakers. I know you're probably thinking, even if the Warriors, they could cover, but say they don't win, Steph is going to take a ton of shots tonight. But Anthony Davis at plus 650 to be the top point scorer, if we're going to take what we discussed in the DFS side of things and carry that over, that to me, that might be something worth looking at. Plus 650 to be the top point scorer tonight.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I don't know. I think Curry, due to the minutes limits, has to do a lot more. And we know Jordan Poole is going to do his, but Curry out there dropping 35 points feels like pretty much a lock.
It's fair. It's fair. I know. I mean, you think about it. If this was a prop just for the Lakers, I think you feel better about it. But the fact that Steph Curry
the spot to attack, even though it's a little bit juiced up, it's 7.5 rebounds on the over for Anthony Davis, just because of just the way the size is for the Warriors. And DeAndre Jordan starting, it can gobble up a bunch of those rebounds. And Russell Westbrook is known to be a rebound snake, but I think 7.5 is a pretty fair number.
Also, we remember too, like DeAndre Jordan, his role he kind of took a back seat quite a bit down the stretch last year for the Nets. Dwight Howard was nice last year from a DFS standpoint and coming off the bench for the Sixers. So who's to say Howard might end up being a guy who elevates himself eventually in his second stint in Los Angeles to be the not go-to center, because I'm not sure what it's going to look like at the end of games for the Lakers, but maybe the rebounds actually favored towards Howard in a second unit situation. So that
does make sense. I think the biggest role for these guys, these two centers, Howard and Jordan for the Lakers is going to be coming in and setting solid screens to kind of get the offense flowing. I think that's going to be their biggest thing, being that role presence, pick and roll, forcing the defense to suck into the middle and then allowing the kickouts to happen. I think that's a big part of why they are on this team and the role they're going to play this year.
Meiselman, any more to add to Lakers Warriors before we look at some futures, some big picture NBA stuff for the season?
Yeah, I'm definitely more excited to look into futures for these two teams, but just quickly on this rebound thing, this is not a point that had occurred to me before, but just based on what you guys were talking about there, like one of the best values that Russell Westbrook brings to a team, because honestly, I don't think he provides that much help in terms of winning basketball games in that many areas, but one thing he is uniquely good at is rebounding from the guard position. And on this Lakers team, they literally don't need it. Like you just mentioned all the guys that can grab rebounds on the Lakers. LeBron is, I mean, I don't know what position you want to call him, but that quote unquote backcourt player, LeBron James, like probably one of the best rebounders in that spot in the NBA. Davis is a great rebounder. They have two centers who can rebound. Like there's almost a diminishing returns on Westbrook's ability to rebound, where like anytime he gets one, he's just stealing a rebound from someone else on the Lakers who probably would have gotten it anyway. So like, that's one of the reasons. I know people, we're going to get into this, right? Does he fit with this team well?
Yeah.
You're almost wasting that skill that he has because they all do it so well already. So I don't really know what the conclusion there is, but it could be one reason why like this team just doesn't produce wins in the way some people might expect, because like, and LeBron and Westbrook too, they're both ball dominant players. LeBron's great enough. He can excel in any role, but like, if he has the ball, how much is Westbrook even helping you? That's kind of why, like, I just don't see this fit for a lot of reasons working out so well with Westbrook. It's just like, if he can't make outside shots, I mean, unless LeBron is willing to be a spot up shooter, which again, that's like diminishing a lot of the value of LeBron. I think really what Westbrook provides is depth more than anything. Like LeBron and Davis are going to miss games this year. Westbrook is going to take over in those games. So it'll be interesting, like how that plays out, how injuries play out. There's definitely a lot of uncertainty with this team though. Like, I don't think it's some foregone conclusion that they're right up there in the Pacific Division. Like my money might be on the Suns to win the division again with the issues the Clippers have, and probably looking at the under on the Lakers win total. Not that they can't win a championship, right? Like once we get to the playoffs, all bets are off. The Lakers play differently in the playoffs. LeBron clearly is much more motivated on defense in the playoffs. But in the regular season, like I don't really see this being a great year for them.
Chirag, that's now why we go to you looking at the overall season outlook. We can certainly discuss these four teams because I think it's worth mentioning again, the top four teams, the top four favored teams to win the title are playing tonight. The Nets number 1, Bucks are number 3, Lakers 2, Warriors are 4 at plus 1,100. But looking at the win total for the Lakers, 52.5, 53 reachable?
53 is reachable. Sure, I don't see this team as being a 500 unit with just how good they're playing, but 52.5 with a team that knows that they don't have to turn the gas on until really towards the end of the year. That's pretty much risking it. And that's in, if you look at how this breaks down, Jazz 52.5, and that's 55.5. There's not really very many teams in the league that have a higher total than the Lakers. So you have the Bucks 54.5. So when you have that, and then what you're saying here is Matt makes a good point with the Suns 51.5. Like, why will the Suns take a back seat? They know that they need to play well and to may have a good chance. So I don't know why I'm just not feeling it completely, but I think there's a chance where it's like, it's going to come down to the last week of the season. It's going to be like 48, 49, somewhere in that range. And then if you want to go to that 52.5, like, so I'm leaning towards the under, but it's going to be close.
So there's plus money on the over right now. And I'm glad you brought up the Suns, because if we go to team futures here and look at division winner, the Suns at plus 215, Meiselman. Chirag's right. The Suns last year, I know the Lakers like backed into the postseason even though they won that play-in game against a pretty good team in the Warriors as far as championship pedigree. But the Suns understand they've got to rack up the regular season wins. They want home court. They want to do nothing. They want to have nothing to do with Staples Center in a game 1 or game 2 and potentially down the road to game 7.
Yeah, I think this is a really good line, with the one caveat being that we don't know for sure that DeAndre Ayton is, like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like there's still the contract situation there where we may see him hold out. Like, we don't actually know what's going on with Ayton, right? So like, for me to go with the Suns here, Ayton, I truly think that Ayton is the most important player on this team because he plays a position for them where they don't have another guy who does what he does. If Paul's out, Booker takes over. If Booker's out, Paul takes over. Like, they can manage that. If DeAndre Ayton isn't playing, the Suns are going to win like 5 less games. So I don't think there's a chance he like misses the whole year or anything. I think they'll figure it out. But like, for me to be confident in the Suns, I want to see Ayton on the court. But for me, like, this is more about being down on the Lakers and the Warriors. And of course, the Clippers are going to be without Kawhi Leonard for a while. So like, to pick the Suns, it's not because I think the Suns are going to just go way over their win total or anything. I think 51 or 52 wins is pretty fair. It's more like, I think both the numbers for the Lakers and Warriors are too high, where in the Lakers case, like, the players on their bench are just not good. And Chirag remembers last year, like, one of the reasons that the Lakers won so much early in the season and got off to this great start is LeBron was like, I'm not sitting out any games back to back, whatever. And like, that didn't work. Like, he eventually got hurt. So I'm curious what you think. Like, will they do that again? Right? Maybe he'll rest some games.
So real quick,
that could be interesting.
LeBron did that too, Chirag, right? Right. The year before he went to LA, he played in every regular season game. Is that right?
Yeah, but that was, he knew he was going to basically leave Cleveland, and he wanted to leave Cleveland on a high note. That's
give them everything he had, kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
We did just get news that Grayson Allen is starting. So there you go.
There you go. We can quickly shift back to that if we'd like. Grayson Allen tonight for the Milwaukee Bucks. He just signed a 2-year, $20 million rookie extension the other day. So he just got paid. So maybe he too, Chirag, will have jitterbugs in his belly tonight. Because
I think he's one of those guys that he didn't win the championship with this team, and there's a chance now where he's like, hey, let me show you guys what you paid for.
Yeah, $3,800. I mean, look, we certainly need the value tonight with all the stars on the docket. Before we go, we can certainly dive into a couple of other future stuff. Do either of you have a take on what's happening in Philadelphia right now with the Sixers? I feel we'd be remiss to not talk about this. Just as far as what we can discuss on the Sixers side, Sportsbook, their win totals at 50.5. To win the East, they have the third best odds behind Brooklyn and Milwaukee, respectively, at plus 750. To win the title, they're the 8th favorite. This all is being brought up because of what's happening with Ben Simmons. He got tossed out of practice today by Doc Rivers for not wanting to participate in a defensive drill. What do you make of the Sixers? Where's Ben Simmons going? What's happening? Who wants to go first? Someone. Give me an answer.
I'll go first, but I'll let Chirag give the longer answer, because to me, it's Doc Rivers, I think, should go well before Ben Simmons goes. Like, I'm a big fan of Ben Simmons as a player. I'm not a fan of Doc Rivers as a coach. So yeah, Chirag, what do you think here? Because like, this just seems like total chaos.
It is total chaos, and it's crazy to think that this is a team that was number 1 in the Eastern Conference last year. So
unbelievable.
I don't believe that Joel Embiid has like an MVP type of year again. I believe that they know that they don't need the number 1 seed with all this uncertainty and potentially bringing another new guy in. And the main person to look at is Damian Lillard. How do the Trailblazers start? They brought in more new pieces. They're over the cap. They don't have any flexibility. Are they going to trade McCollum and try to change this lineup up and move Norm Powell to shooting guard, bring in some more different type of depth? I don't know, but I think that's the biggest move that we have to potentially wait for. Is what is Damian Lillard's status going to be with this Chauncey Billups new kind of look?
Yeah, it feels like a lot of that now was rumors on the Lillard side of things, right? And maybe we do get an Anthony Davis to the Lakers kind of move for the Trailblazers, where they actually finally bring in a star. All the moves they've made. They went out and got Covington. Who they got somebody else last year. They got who they get from Norman Powell. Like they just like these B minus, B plus, I guess, moves that try to appease their star, and it's just not moving the bar for Portland. So maybe they but then you have to figure they have to get off to a good start to provide any value to get something if those pieces are good enough to then equate to a star. I'm not sure what Portland is enough in their arsenal to get a star.
They do. I think that they do because they can give away draft picks, and their players that they're trading that they could potentially trade away are all starting caliber players. Like Covington's a great defender, potentially has a chance to lead the league in stocks, blocks, and steals. And McCollum, certified scorer. You know you can get 20, 25 points a night from CJ McCollum. Yusuf Nurkic, solid center. Yeah, he's now back in his year after that gruesome injury on his leg. So I think they have a lot of pieces that they can make some moves and trying to, if they want to go with the rebuild and bring in another superstar to tag team with Lillard, or if they want to use Lillard as the bait and get everything else rearranged.
All right, so I have three questions, rapid fire, and then we'll go. 3 topics that we can discuss. We've been doing this a little bit with win totals. Meiselman, what's a win total, regular season win total that you feel passionate about, that you like, if you had to do it today, you'd put a little something on it?
So I have 3 of them, and 2 of them I've already mentioned. So that's why I'm including another one. I think the unders on both the Lakers and the Warriors are really appealing. Like, I just think the depth of both those teams is weak. I don't think we're going to see a real version of Klay Thompson until the second half of the year. Like, we're going to see him play limited minutes for a while, and we have no idea how effective he's even going to be. Like, the idea that Kevin Durant could come back from an injury and therefore anyone else could do it. Like, Kevin Durant is a special athlete. I don't think we can just assume Klay is going to have as easy of a time returning after. I mean, he hasn't played in quite some time.
Yeah.
And I think Jordan Poole is going to be a good fantasy player this year. I don't think he's really a good real life player yet. James Wiseman was like the worst player in the NBA last season. Draymond Green is good and Steph Curry's great. And then like the rest of the team is nothing special. Like, I think this is an average team overall. And the Lakers, we already talked about. The other one that I don't really get the hype on is the Bulls. Like, to me, they just have a bunch of average-ish players and then maybe a couple that are a little above average. Like, I
plus money on the under 43.5.
I could see this team going under 500. Like, I just don't really get the excitement around them. I don't think DeMar DeRozan is a good basketball player anymore. Like, he's a guy who can shoot a lot and be a high volume scorer. But
fantasy, yeah, back to your point you just made. Maybe a good fantasy player, but is he going to deliver W's?
Yeah, and like, he's taking away shots from Zach LaVine, who's probably a lot better than him. Yep. I don't think the team really fits that well. They kind of just have a bunch of scorers who aren't great scorers, with the exception of maybe LaVine takes a step forward. Okay. And he did last year, so I guess he could potentially take another step forward and become like an elite player in the NBA. And if he does that, then they'll probably hit the over. But like, this isn't a team that has, except for maybe LaVine, like a real all-star. Like, I think Vucevic is good, but I don't think he's great. Like, he's
an all-star. It's a big man.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there were injuries right across the league last year that he might not have gotten in otherwise. But like, I think he's well below the upper tier of guys like Jokic and Embiid and even Karl Anthony Towns. Like, I think Vucevic is not on that level. So to me, it's just like average across the board. And DeRozan is probably the piece there that's significantly overvalued, which is why that total is higher than what I think it should be.
Chirag, you got one before we move to MVP and championship stuff?
I like what the Raptors did. You know, you have a chance here with Fred VanVleet to maybe play a little bit off the ball and continue or he can take another step forward. We can have a bounce back year from Spicy P, OG Anunoby. I think that there's solid depth here, and it's only 35.5. So yeah, it's juiced up a little bit at -130, but I think the Raptors make a little bit of sense. And then also the Sixers, due to all that uncertainty, 50.5, that's a lot of wins to have to hit. That there's a chance that this team could be just floundering at 500 with this situation looming for at least the beginning part of the season.
All right, we need to go. Like, one-word answers here. MVP, Meiselman.
MVP. Oh man, I have to do a one-word answer on this. I'll go with Luka. Not that confident though.
Okay, he's the favorite. Chirag?
Durant.
And finally, championship matchup. Who wins the title?
Lakers.
Against who? The Nets?
I don't know.
Right.
Lakers, baby.
Meiselman, you got one?
All right, I'll give the long shot pick. I think the Clippers show up in the playoffs and make the run to the finals once Kawhi's healthy. Like we'll be on a couple months from now when Kawhi is like starting to ramp up basketball activity and getting closer to getting back on the court. Clippers are going to have some insane odds to win the championship, and maybe they sneak into the playoffs and then he takes over. Like that's the spot I'm looking at. I think as a long shot, they
all right, we got to get going. We have the slate again tomorrow. Great to have the NBA back. The Sweat is at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. Also 5 o'clock. You'll have the slate tomorrow with Emerson, Reed, and Jeff talking golf and NFL. NBA's back, fellas. Good luck with the lineups. Good luck with your picks. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.